Hey there everyone, Ramesh here. Welcome to Spring Boot React Full Stack Application Development course. In this course, you will learn how to develop a full stack web application that is basic employee management application using React.js and Spring Boot. So this is complete a coding or development course. And in this course, we are going to build a basic employee management application from the scratch. And we will build these features like create employee, list employee, update employee, delete employee, and view employee features. So this is going to an awesome course, and in this course you are going to learn everything how to you develop full stack application using React and Spring Boot. And we will also look into the full stack development architecture with React and Spring Boot. So I highly suggest you guys to watch this course till the end. You are going to learn a lot of things about full stack development using React and Spring Boot. Okay, and I'm damn sure that you will find this course very useful. Okay, so before developing this project from the scratch, let's first have a demo what exactly we are going to build in this course. So look at here, this is our user interface of employee management application. This is the employees list page. Here basically a list of employees are listed in this page. Here we have add employee button. So we can use add employee button to add a new employee to the employees list. Let's go ahead and let's click on add button. Here we go. So this is the add employee page through which we can add a new employee. Let's go ahead and let's add a new employee. First name Ramesh, last name Fadatare, email ID ramesh@gmail.com, and hit save button. So this will add a new employee to the employees list. Let's go ahead and let's quickly add another employee. Let's say John Sina, email ID john@gmail.com, hit save button. Here we go. So we have added two employees to the employees list. Let's go ahead and let's update one of the employee. I'm going to update Ramesh employee. Click on update button. And here I will update from Ramesh to Ram, and email ID from ramesh@gmail.com to ram@gmail.com, and hit save button. Here we go. So employee is successfully updated. Now I can use delete button to delete a corresponding employee. Let us say I'm going to delete a Ram employee. Click on delete button to delete the employee. These are the CRUD functionalities that we are going to develop in this video tutorial series. So again, look at here, this is the header and this is the footer, and in header section we have employees and add employee link. We can click on employees link to navigate to the employees list page, and we can click on add employee link to navigate to the add employee page. Alright guys, now let us take a quick overview of React and Spring Boot. React is used to build user interfaces on the front end. So basically React is one of the popular JavaScript library to develop single page applications, and React is not a framework. Unlike Angular, React is not a framework, it is just a JavaScript library to build user interfaces. Okay, React is an open source project created by Facebook. Alright, Spring Boot is getting more popularity, especially for developing RESTful web services and microservices. Spring Boot has taken Spring framework to the next level. It has drastically reduced the configuration and setup time required for Spring projects. You can set up Spring project with almost zero configuration and start building the things that actually matter to your application. Alright guys, we are going to use React to develop user interface and Spring Boot to develop a RESTful web services. Okay, what you will learn in this video tutorial series: you will develop your first full stack application with React and Spring Boot. You will learn the basics of building awesome front-end applications with React. You will be introduced to building great RESTful APIs with Spring Boot. Basically, we are going to develop a CRUD RESTful web services with Spring Boot, and we are going to use Spring Data JPA to develop a repository layer, and we are going to use MySQL database to store and retrieve the data. You will learn how to make a REST API call from React application to Spring Boot RESTful API. You will learn the basics of React components, JSX, state, and props. So we are going to develop a lot of React components, and we are going to write a lot of JSX code, and we are going to use a component states and props in React application. So we will learn the basics of React. So basically you will develop a employee management full stack application step by step with CRUD functionalities. We are going to understand Spring Boot React full stack application architecture. Alright, so if you can see here the architecture diagram, at the front end we have a React application architecture, and at the back end we have Spring Boot application architecture. Okay, so let's first understand Spring Boot application architecture at the back end, and then we'll move to a React application architecture at the front end, and then we'll talk about how to integrate React and Spring Boot application together as a full stack application. Okay, great. Let's come to Spring Boot application architecture first. In a Spring Boot application, we have 3-layer architecture: controller layer, service layer, a repository, or a DAO layer. So controller layer holds all the Spring MVC controllers. Okay, basically controller process the request, that is a web request, and it will validate the request, and then it will send that request data to the service layer, and from the service layer it goes to repository layer, and then finally it's saved in a database. Well, controller layer basically holds Spring MVC controllers, and service layer holds all the business logic. Okay, we keep all our business logic in service layer. Apart from business logic, if you have any call to the third-party REST APIs, then you can also keep that logic in a service layer. And repository or DAO layer, so basically we keep database related logic or persistence logic in this layer. And repository or DAO layer is basically responsible to talk with the database. So this is the pretty simple architecture at a backend with Spring Boot. Okay, so this is the typical architecture we use Spring Boot applications. All right, now let's move to React application architecture. So in a React we have different layer like router, components, and services. So different developers follow different architecture or a project structure in a React applications, but typically I see that there are different components like components layer and service layer and router layer. So in a router we typically configure a URL corresponding to components, and in components we basically keep all the component related logic, that is UI logic, and different components are there in a React, that is functional component or class component, and we can use React hooks in the components. All right, and we have a service, so we keep typically all the REST API calls in a service service layer, and we inject service layer in a components, and we call its method from the components. Okay, and if you use a Redux, then you may have different layers in a React application. And look at here in a service component or service class, we need to use a third-party library to make a REST API call, because React is not concerned with HTTP. We have to use third-party HTTP library to make a REST API call from the React application. So Axios is one of the popular HTTP library that we can use to make a REST API call from the React application. All right, so this is how the typical structure in a React application. Now in terms of integration, so from the Spring Boot application we expose the REST endpoints, and the React application basically consume the REST APIs. And as I mentioned earlier, React is not concerned with HTTP, so in order to make a REST API or Ajax call from the React, we have to use third-party library, for example Axios library. Okay, or we can also use a JavaScript fetch API. Okay, so this is how basically we integrate a React application with Spring Boot, by using third-party HTTP library or a fetch API. All right, so this is pretty much about Spring Boot or React full stack application architecture. Now let's quickly have a look into what are the tools and technologies that we'll be using at the front end side. We use a React JavaScript library to develop a single page application, and we are going to use modern JavaScript, and we are going to use Node.js and npm to install and create the project. and libraries, and we are going to use Visual Studio Code ID to develop a React application, and we are going to use Create React App command line tool to quickly create and run React application, and we are going to use Bootstrap CSS library to style our web pages, and we are going to use Axios HTTP library to make a REST API call. Alright guys, now let's quickly take a look at what are the tools and technologies that we are going to use at a server side. We are going to use Spring Boot 2+, and we are going to use Spring Data JPA. It internally uses Hibernate ORM framework to develop a DAO layer, and we are going to use Maven 3.2+ as a build and project management tool, and we are going to use JDK 1.8, and we are going to use embedded Tomcat server, that is 8.5+, and we are going to use MySQL database. And to develop Spring Boot application, we are going to use Eclipse STS IDE. Let us take a prerequisites for this tutorial series. You should have basic knowledge of HTML and CSS. You should have understanding of JavaScript and programming, and you should make sure that you have installed Node.js and npm on your machine, and you should have some basic understanding of React. I am not going to cover the basics of React, though I am going to explain you the basics while project development, but please spend a few minutes to understand the React basics like components, states, props, alright, and routing, etc. So we'll focus on developing a project, not the basic concepts. Let's open Eclipse STS IDE and let's quickly create a Spring Boot project. In Eclipse STS IDE, go to the File section, New, and then choose Spring Starter Project. So look at here, this is a Spring Initializer website URL, and Spring Initializer is integrated in Eclipse STS IDE, and we can use Spring Initializer to quickly create and bootstrap Spring based project. Let's give a name to the project like Spring Boot Backend, and keep type as Maven, packaging as a jar, Java version 8, language Java. Let's give group ID as net.java guides, and artifact ID is same as the name of the project, and keep version and description as it is, and keep package as net.javaguides.springboot, but you can give any package name that you want. Once you are happy with project details, click next, and here we have Spring Boot version, that is 2.3.1. so this is the latest release of Spring Boot as of now. Now what we'll do, we'll pick up Spring Boot starter dependencies. Let's go ahead and let's pick up Spring Web starter dependency. We use Spring Web starter dependency to develop RESTful web services, and let's go ahead and let's pick up Spring Data JPA dependency. So we use Spring Data JPA dependency to develop a repository layer, and Spring Data JPA internally uses Hibernate as a JPA provider. We basically use Spring Data JPA to reduce a lot of boilerplate code that is required to develop a DAO layer. Alright, and we are going to use MySQL database. So let's quickly pick up MySQL JDBC driver, and let's also choose Spring Boot DevTools dependency. Spring Boot DevTools dependency. So we use this dependency because whenever we make some changes in a project, we no need to restart the server again and again. Okay. Alright guys, once you select all the required dependencies, hit finish. This will create a Spring Boot project in Eclipse STS IDE. Yeah, here we go. Once we have created a Spring Boot project, let's go ahead and let's create a database. Open MySQL Workbench and just type SQL statement like create database followed by name of the database. Let's give name of the database as employee management underscore system, something like this, and execute this SQL statement and refresh here, and look at here, the employee management system database is get created. Once we create a database, let's go ahead and let's configure MySQL JDBC URL, username, password in Spring Boot project. Go to the resource folder. Within the resource folder, open application.properties file, and here just type spring.datasource.url. Okay, let's give JDBC URL to connect to the MySQL database. So look at here, we have employee management system database that just we have created in MySQL Workbench. Similarly, let's go ahead and let's configure username and password. Let's type the property spring.datasource.username. It's root. Let's also configure password. It's again root. Okay, so make sure that you will change JDBC URL, username, password as per your MySQL database installation on your machine. Now let's go ahead and let's configure Hibernate properties. We are using MySQL database, so we have to configure Hibernate dilate for MySQL database. So look at here, this is a property and this is the value. So we are using MySQL 5 dilate. Okay, now let's go ahead and let's configure one more Hibernate property. So look at here, so this is a Hibernate detail auto property. So we use this property to automatically create the tables in a database. So Hibernate will automatically create tables in a database. We no need to manually create the tables. Alright guys, once we configure JDBC credentials and Hibernate properties, let's go ahead and let's create a packaging structure. Right click on root package, new, and then choose package, and let's give package name as model. Let's create one more package. Right click on root package, new, and then choose package, and let's give package name as controller. Again, let's go ahead and let's create one more package. Let's name it as a repository. Alright, so let's go ahead and create one more package and let's name it as exception. Alright, let's go ahead and let's create a JP entity. Right click on model package, new, and then choose class. Let's give an entity name as employee. Alright, let's quickly define the instance variables. Private long ID, private string first name, private string last name, and private string email ID. Alright, let's quickly create getter setter methods to access these private fields. And also create a parameterized constructor. Right click, source, generate constructor using fields, deselect ID and hit generate. And let's also create a default constructor. So remember, whenever you create a parameterized constructor, you have to create a default constructor, because Hibernate internally uses proxies to create proxy objects. Alright, once we have created employee class, now let's go ahead and let's use JP annotations to map this model to the relational database table. Let's go ahead and let's use @entity annotation, and let's also use @table annotation to provide a table name. Let's give table name as employees. Alright, let's define a primary key for our table. Let's use @id annotation, and also let's use a generation primary key generation strategy. For that, let's use @generatorValue annotation, and it has a property called strategy, and let's use generation type as identity, and let's use @column annotation to provide a column name to the field. Here basically we map a column name to the field, and we can also give a column name over here. Let's use a name attribute to provide a column name. Let's say first underscore name, and let's copy this, and let's similarly give a column name to the last name, last underscore name, and also give a column name to the email ID, email underscore ID. That's it, guys. That is pretty much we have created employee JP entity. Now what we'll do, we'll create a repository interface. Right click on repository package, new, and then choose interface. Here let's give a repository name as employee repository. Great. Now what we'll do, we'll extend this interface from JPA repository. So JPA repository basically exposes database CRUD methods like save, find by ID, find all, delete by ID, delete. Okay, it exposes a lot of methods, and it provides out of the box implementation for all the database methods, so we don't need to write any boilerplate code that is required to develop the DAO layer. Let's pass employee JP entity, and here the type of the primary key. Let's annotate this interface with @repository annotation. Alright, so look at here. JP repository provides a lot of methods like find all, and also it provides a sorting support, okay, and also provides pagination. So look at here, it internally extends paging and sorting repository. Paging and sorting repository interface provides support for sorting and pagination, and paging and sorting repository extends CRUD repository. So CRUD repository interface exposes all the CRUD methods for an entity. Okay, for example, save all, find by ID, exist by ID. Okay, so JPA repository internally extends all these interfaces, so we can leverage all these methods. We no need to create methods over here. Okay, great. Now it's time to create a RESTful web services. So before that, let's go ahead and let's create one custom exception class. Right click on exception package, new, and then choose class, and let's name this custom exception class as a resource not found exception. So whenever a resource not exists in a database, then we can throw this exception. Okay, from the API layer, REST API basically throws this exception that we will see a bit later. This exception extends a runtime exception. Okay, and a runtime exception internally implements serializable interface. So let's go ahead and let's quickly add the serial version ID here. Let's say public, and here let's pass string message, and we simply pass this message to the super class. Okay, it's pretty simple custom exception. Now let's annotate this exception class with @response status annotation. Use value property, and let us say HTTP status not found. Okay, So basically we use this custom exception. So whenever a record not exists in database, then REST API will throw this exception, and we have annotated this exception with @response status annotation. So API will return a not found status to the client. Okay, that's great. Now let's go ahead and let's create Spring MVC controller. Right click on controller package, new, and then choose class, and let's call controller class as employee controller. Okay, within a controller we create a REST APIs. So let's add @REST controller annotation, and also add @request mapping annotation, and let's define a standard URL over here /API/version v1. So this is the standard we use typically whenever we develop a REST APIs like v1, like version 1. So we are releasing all the REST APIs as release 1, and this is the API. So this is a standard URL endpoint that typically we use in our REST APIs. Okay, now let's go ahead and let's inject employee repository over here, employee repository, and let's add @while annotation to inject this repository by Spring container. Now we'll develop get all employees REST API. Just type public and then list. So this REST API should return a list of employees to the client. So let's give return type as list of employees. Let's give a method name as get all employees. Alright, and just return employee repository dot find all method. So look at here, find all method returns a list of employees. Okay, let's select this, and let's add @get mapping annotation, and let's specify a URL here /employees. Okay, so once we hit a URL in a browser like localhost 8080 API/v1/employees, then this REST API will get called, and this API returns a list of employees to the client. Alright, let's go ahead and let's run the Spring Boot project, and let us test this REST API. Open our Spring Boot main class, right click and run as Spring Boot app. Alright guys, our Spring Boot application is up and running on embedded Tomcat server on port 8080. And look at here, we haven't created create employee REST API in order to create records in a database. We have directly created get all employees. So what we'll do, we'll insert some records in an employees table in a database, and we call this REST API, and we'll retrieve this API will retrieve all the employees from the table, and it will return to the client. Okay, let's go back to the MySQL workbench and let's insert few records. Now if we refresh the schemas, and if you look at here, employees management system database, a employees table is created. Okay, so this table is automatically created by Hibernate. And now right click and select rows. So if you look at the table, there are no records in a table. So let's quickly insert few records. One email ID ramesh@gmail.com, first name Ramesh, last name Fadtari, and also insert one more record, Tony@gmail.com, first name Tony, last name Stark. Let's keep these two records and hit apply and finish. Alright, let's execute this select statement again in order to make sure that the records are there in a table. Yeah, we have 2 records in a table. Now let's go back to the browser and let's hit a REST API in a browser tab, and we'll be able to get a response as a JSON array of employees objects. Okay, great. Alright guys, open the browser, go to the new tab and just type localhost 8080/API/v1/employees and hit enter. Yeah, here we go. We got a JSON array as a response from the REST API. We can use Postman REST client to test our get all employees REST API. So open a Postman client and in a enter request URL just type localhost 8080/API/v1/employees and select HTTP GET method. Alright, and hit send button, and here you can see we got a JSON response. We got an array of employee objects. Okay, great. Let's create a React application. Let's begin by setting up our development environment for React. We need to have 2 things installed: Node and text editor of your choice. For Node, go to the official website of Node.js and you can download the latest release of Node.js and you can install on your machine. If you have already installed Node.js, then make sure that you have upgraded to the latest release of Node.js. For text editor, I recommend you to use VS Code IDE. Alright. To get started, I have created a folder called React Spring Boot CRUD app. In this folder, we are going to create React application. Now, to create a new React application, we are going to make use of create React app command line tool. Go to the browser and just search for create a React app and hit enter and choose the second link. Create React app is a command line tool that we can use to quickly create a React application with no configuration. Alright, what that means is you simply run few commands and the entire React project is created for you. Let's see how to do it. So look at here, these are the commands we are going to use to quickly create and run React application. So go back in a VS Code IDE and open integrated terminal and run the command npx create react app followed by name of the project. Let's call project name as React Frontend. Alright, you can also refer this command from the official GitHub website. So look at here, you can refer these commands over here. Okay, great. Once you enter the command, hit enter. So this will create a React application. Let's wait for a moment. It will take few seconds to create and set up a React application. Once the command completes, you can able to see a new folder is created here, React Frontend. To run newly created React application, you first need to navigate to the project folder. Just type cd react -frontend, hit enter. Also you can refer the commands over here. Okay, now just type the command npm start to start the React application. So look at here, the command open a browser with the URL localhost 3000 and our React application is running on port 3000. So let me copy this URL and let me open in a Chrome browser. Just close this browser and open Chrome browser. In a new tab, just enter the URL localhost 3000. Yeah, here we go. So we have successfully created a React application and we have started React application, and now the React application is running on local development server on port 3000. Now let's quickly change app.js file to some text like hello world, and we'll see how the changes will get reflected on a page in a React application. Go back to the VSID, expand React frontend folder, expand src folder, and go to the app.js file. Here what we'll do, we'll simply remove this code, and here just give h1 tag with some text hello world. Save the file. So look at here, the development server will automatically refresh the browser and you can able to see hello world text on a page. Alright guys, we have successfully created our React application. Now we are good to go with our actual development. Before that, let's quickly have a folder structure of our newly created React application. In the React application, at a root level, you can see 3 folders and 4 files. Let's begin with package.json file. So look at here, package.json contains dependencies and scripts required for the projects. You can see here the React dependency is specified in package.json with its version, okay, and similarly React DOM and React scripts. And here are the few scripts to run the React application, to build the React application, and to test the React application. Alright, so these are the dependencies and scripts that we configure in package.json. And you can able to see here readme file, so it contains the commands and the necessary stuff required to create and run a React application. Let's take a look at the folder. We have node_modules folder. So inside this folder all the dependencies are installed. So basically this folder will get created whenever you create a React app using create React app command line tool, or when you run npm install command. Okay, so look at here, you can see a lot of JavaScript libraries installed in this under this folder. And we have public folder. Within the public folder we have few files, favicon, so this is not specific to React, and manifest.json, so this is the file which is related to progressive web apps. So we are not, with this file is out of scope of this project. So we have index.html file. Index.html file is the only file you are going to have in your application, as we are building single page application. So we have only one HTML file, and all the code will dynamically update inside this div. So look at here, this is the div with id equals to root. So all the React components will dynamically get updated inside this div tag. Okay, so most of the time we're not going to change this file. Sometime we might change the header, but we definitely don't change a body section. Alright, so this is very important file. So as we are building single page application, we should have only one HTML file, and we will dynamically update the div tag here. Okay, great. Now let's expand src folder. Under the src folder we can see app.js file. So this is our root component. So this is basically a React functional component, and inside this component we can see a JSX code. So JSX is basically a JavaScript XML like code, which is just an extension of JavaScript language syntax. And JSX is basically looks like a XML code that React team has recommended to use in a React applications. So JSX is not a necessity to create a React applications, but React team has recommended to use JSX because JSX makes a React code very simpler and elegant and neat. So for this reason we can use a JSX in our application. Alright guys, so app component is our root component, and so look at here, this is index.js file. So the control flow, like whenever we deploy our application and we use localhost 3000 in a browser, then first HTML index.html will get served, and after that index.js file will get executed, and inside index.js file we can see here React DOM and render method. So we are passing app component to render method of React DOM, and this component will get rendered inside the DOM element which has ID root. So look at here, this ID we have specified in index.html. So look at here, this is a div with ID or root, and inside this div the React DOM will basically render app component. Alright guys, I hope we understood the flow. Now let's integrate Bootstrap CSS library in React application. We are going to use Bootstrap CSS library to style our web pages. Okay, Bootstrap CSS library is basically a framework. It is popular for developing responsive web applications and websites. Okay, so there are a couple of ways to use a Bootstrap in React application, and I'm going to show you two simplest ways to integrate Bootstrap in React application. So one is we can use Bootstrap CDN links directly, and another is you can install Bootstrap using npm command. We'll see both the ways. Okay, so first we'll open integrated terminal. So you can switch terminals over here. So on first integrated terminal or node, React application is running, and in a second integrated terminal we are going to run the commands. Okay, great. So in order to get a CDN Bootstrap link, go to the browser, and in a browser just type Bootstrap CDN link and hit enter. So we are going to use Bootstrap 4, so let's also specify Bootstrap 4 here, and click on the first link. So this is the official website of Bootstrap, and look at here, this is the CDN link that we can use. Click on copy button and go back to the Visual Studio Code ID and open index.html file. Go to the header section, and in the header section just below the title tag paste it. Okay, so once you add CDN Bootstrap link, you are good to use Bootstrap CSS classes. Now let's see the second way. So I will just remove this link. Second way is by using npm command. Just type npm bootstrap npm install bootstrap -- save. So make sure that you have added -- save here. So basically this will add a entry in a package.json. Okay, so let me open package.json. So look at here, a Bootstrap library is not added in a package.json. As soon as I run this command, a new entry will add to the package.json. Hit enter, Let's wait for a second. So this command takes a second to download and install Bootstrap. Yeah, here we go. Let's refresh it. So notice here, Bootstrap library with its version is added here in a package.json. Alright, so once a Bootstrap CSS library installed, what we'll do, we'll import a Bootstrap CSS file in our React application. So go to the index.js file and here just type import and then bootstrap /disk/css/bootstrap.min.css. okay, now we have successfully installed and we have imported Bootstrap CSS library in our React application. Now we are good to use React. We are good to use a Bootstrap CSS classes in our React application. Alright, we have created a React application and we have integrated Bootstrap CSS library in our React application. In this video, let's quickly create a React component to display a list of users on our web page. Alright guys, go to the source folder, src folder, and just within a src folder create a new folder called components. Okay, under components folder, let's create a file. Let's name it as ListEmployeeComponent. So look at here the naming conventions. It is in the component name should be in a camel case and the extension is JSX. So you can also use JS, that is not a problem, but we are going to write a JSX code inside this component so we can have an extension like JSX. Okay, you can probably see a lot of you know React developers sometimes use a JS extension or JSX extension. There is no difference, but whenever we use a JSX inside a component, we typically use .jsx extension. Alright, hit enter. Now the important thing is I am going to use React snippets to quickly create a React component. I highly recommend you guys to use React snippets in Visual Store Code IDE to quickly create React components and few React other like functional component or services, etc. So in order to install React snippets, go to the browser and just type React snippets for VS Code. Go to the React Code snippets website and you can click on install. So this will install React.js code snippets in VS Code. I already installed, so I'm going to use React snippets to quickly create a React class component. So typically there are two types of components in React. One is stateless functional component and other is stateful class component, and most of the time I'm going to use class component throughout this video tutorial series. Let's type the command rcc. So this will create a class, React class component. Just hit enter. So look at here the skeleton of React class component. So this is very useful React snippet. I highly recommend you guys to use React snippets in a Visual Store Code IDE to quickly create this kind of snippets. Alright, so look at here inside this component we have constructor. Within a constructor we have state. This is the state which belongs to this component, and this component extends a component. Component is from the React library, and here inside a constructor we have a super and we pass props to the super class, that is a React component. Okay, and within a component we have a render method And inside a render method we have a return statement, and inside a return we write a JSX code inside a return statement. Alright guys, we are going to display list of employees on a web page. For that, what I will do, I will simply initialize an array here, employees, inside a state, and here inside a div we are going to write a JSX code. Alright, just you can start typing code with me so that you will understand a lot of things. Let me quickly add h2 tag to show the page header. So look at here, this is the employees list. So this is the header we display on a page, and we should display this title at the center. So look at here the class name. So in React we use a lower camel case attributes to to point CSS class. For example, in plain HTML we use class like this. Alright, but in React we use the camel case like this: class, then name, so n should be caps, and then we specify CSS class name. Alright, great. Let's create a table, HTML table with some CSS classes, Bootstrap CSS classes. So let's first create a div tag here, and then let's specify some classes like row, and inside that we are going to create a table. Inside a table, let's apply CSS class to the table. So these are the Bootstrap CSS classes that we just added to the table. So inside table, let's go ahead and let's add a table header, create a table row, and inside that let's add table header. So this is the employee first name. Let's copy this, paste it 4 times, and let's change accordingly. Employee last name, employee email ID, and this is actions. So under actions you can see edit and delete button. Alright, we have created a table header. Now it's time to create a table body. Inside table body, basically we write a JavaScript code to dynamically display a table rows. Let's see how to do it. We have already added a employees array in a state. So basically we make a REST API call, and we store a REST API call response into employees object, and we iterate over employees object, and we display in a table. So for time being we don't make a call in this video. So in next video we write a code to make a call to the REST API, and we store data into employees array, and that will be again displayed on a table. Let's write a code here inside curly braces. So we're going to dynamically add the rows, right? We have state. Inside the state we have defined employees array. We are going to use a map. So this is a ES6 feature that we are going to leverage, and then we are going to iterate over employees. So this is the employee, and arrow, and inside this we are going to define the row. Okay, so for each row we should have a unique key. So let's define that: employee dot id, and again inside a row let's have td element, and let's populate employee first name, employee last name, copy this, and here employee ID. Okay, in actions we define delete and update buttons whenever we implement delete and update functionalities. Alright guys, now what we'll do, we'll copy this component and we'll go to the app.js file and we remove this code, and we also remove app class name and just provide a Bootstrap CSS class, that is container. Inside this div tag, let's import ListEmployeeComponent, and make sure that ListEmployeeComponent is imported at the top. Just save this file and go back to the browser and let us see the changes. In a browser you can able to see the list. Okay, so what we have done, we have created a ListEmployeeComponent and we have added a JSX code to display a table in a web page. Okay, in the next video we'll make a REST API call. We'll get our data from the REST API and we will populate in a table. Great. In previous video we have created a ListEmployeeComponent to display a list of employees on a web page. Now in this video what we'll do, we'll make a REST API call and we will populate a data on a web page. So in order to make a call to the REST API in React application, we have to use third-party HTTP library. For example, we are going to use Axios HTTP library in our video tutorial series, but you can use browser fetch API to make a REST API call. So there are plenty of HTTP library out there, but Axios HTTP library is popular and it provides a very flexible APIs to work with HTTP calls. So I'm going to use Axios HTTP library to make a REST API call. So what we'll do, we'll install Axios library in our React application and we'll write a REST client code to call a REST API. Let's go ahead and let's add Axios HTTP library in our React application. Go to the integrated terminal and just type the command npm install Axios and then -- save. So make sure that you have add -- save at the end. So this will add a entry in package.json. Hit enter. So this will take a couple seconds to install Axios library in our React application. Alright, now you can see the command completes, and if you open package.json file, and you can able to see a new entry added with Axios and its version. Okay, great. Now we have successfully installed Axios library in our React application. Now we are going to create a separate service class which will invoke a REST API. For that, go to the src folder. Within src folder, let's create one more folder. Let's call it as services, and within a service folder, let's create a file. Let's name it as employee service.js. So look at here the extension .js. We are not going to write any JSX code inside this file, so we can ignore JSX here. So just give extension .js. So inside this JavaScript file, we are going to create a JavaScript class. Let's name it as employee service. Okay, and in previous videos at the backend we have created REST API and we have tested using Postman REST client, right? So this is the URL which will get a list of employees from the REST API. So if you hit send button, you can see here we got a list of employees as an array in a response. Okay, go back to the VS Code. Let's import Axios library inside this JavaScript file. Import Axios from Axios, and let's define a REST endpoint URL over here. So look at here, this is our base REST API URL, localhost 8080 API /v1/employees. Let's create a method get employees, and this method returns a response of get method. Okay, so Axios basically provides a get method. Let's call get, and here we pass a base URL. Okay, so we are simply returning a response of get method, and now what we'll do, we'll simply export this class object. Export default new and the employee. So this is the important notice here, we are not going to export a class. In fact, we are going to export object of this class, so we can directly use object of this class inside a component. Alright, we have successfully written a REST client code using Axios to make a REST API call. Now what we'll do, we'll use employee service object in a component. Let's go back to the list employee component here, and here just type component did mount method. So look at here, component did amount method is called immediately after a component is mounted. So this is the best place to call a REST API. So whenever you want to make AJAX calls or REST API calls, always use component did amount, because this method will get immediately called after a component is mounted. So inside this method we are going to use employee service dot get employee. So this method returns promise, so let's use then method. Okay, and it has a response. So here just set a response to the employees array. So in order to set a data to the state of the component, we are going to use set state method. Set state inside a curly and close braces, just use employees and response dot data. Alright guys, we have successfully stored a response data into employees array. Now save the file and go back to the browser, and let us see the data is populated on a page or not. Let's open our developer tools in Chrome browser, and let us see the network tab. Refresh, and here go to the console, and you can able to see here we got course policy issue. So in order to avoid this issue, what we will do, we will add cross annotation on top of employee controller in Spring Boot application. Go back to the Spring Boot project, open employee controller, and here what we'll do, we'll add an annotation called cross origin annotation, and it has origin attributes, and save the controller, and the Spring Boot project is restarted. Now let us see, let's go to the browser and let's refresh the URL, and here we go, we have successfully got a response of a REST API, and the same response is populated on a page. Alright guys, in this video we'll add header and footer to our React application. Let's go ahead and let's create a React component to add header and footer to our React application. Let's go back to VS Code and go to the components folder. Within components folder, create a new file. Let's call it as header component dot JSX, and let's use RCC React snippet command to quickly create a React component. Go to the components folder, create a new file. Let's call it as footer component dot JSX. Hit enter, and let's use RCC to create a component. Alright, go to the header component. Here basically we write a code to design a header part of our web page. Let's type header tag. Inside a header tag, let's create a navigation tag, and let's add a CSS classes to the navigation HTML element, and then add a title of the header. Let's say employee management application. Okay, great. Let's save the file and go to the footer component. Let's add some code to the footer. Let's say footer HTML element, and let's add a CSS class like footer, and just create a spam HTML element with content all rights reserved to at Java Guides. So this is my website, so I have specified over here. Alright, so we have created header and footer. Now let's add some CSS to our app.css class. Alright, now what we'll do, once we create a footer and header, let's go to the app.js file. So inside app.js file we are going to import these two components. So here create a div, and inside a div let's import a header component. Make sure that header component is imported at the top, and then let's copy this and let's paste here. Let me make alignment. Okay, after that let's import a footer component here. So make sure that footer component is imported at the top. So save all the files. And one more important thing here is, so look at here, we have added .jsx extension to the files, right? But you can also use a JS extension. For example, I just remove JSX extension to JS. Okay, and if you save all the files and if you go back to the browser, you will be able to see the component is detected, will detect in a React application. Yeah, here it is. So look at here, we have successfully added header and footer to our React application, and this header and footer is going to apply all the React components because we have added these two components in app.js file. Alright guys, we have successfully added header and footer to our React application. In this video we are going to configure routing for our employee management application. So far we have created list employee component and we have populated a list of employees on a page. Alright, we have exposed list employee REST API, and we have created a component in React which will call a REST API and render a response of the REST API on our web page. And going forward, we will be creating a lot of React components. So before that, we have to create a routing for our application. In this video, we'll create a routing for application step by step. Okay, we are going to use a React router package to configure routing for our application. Let's go ahead and let's install React router using npm command. Go to the integrate terminal and go to the project, go to the inside project and just type the command npm install and then React router DOM. Hit enter. So this will take a couple of seconds to install a package in node_modules folder. Let's wait for a moment. Alright guys, we have successfully installed React router DOM package in our project. Go to the app.js file. So this file contains app component, and app component is our root component, so we should configure routing inside this component. Okay, so because if you look at index.js file, we have given app component as a root component to render inside a React DOM.render. Alright, go back to app.js file, and here inside app.js file we will configure routing. Alright, now let's go ahead and let's import browser router, route and switch elements from React router DOM. Import from React router and then DOM. So let's go ahead and let's import browser router. Let's give alias to this as router, and then let's also import a route element and also import switch element. Here we are going to use switch element from React router DOM because this element will ensure that only one component will render at the same time. Okay, great. Now once we import browser router, route and switch element from React router DOM, let's go ahead and let's use these elements in an app component. So notice here, whenever we want to render, we first go inside a browser router. Okay, let's first create a router over here. Just close here. After that, let's create a div. Let's give class name equals, let's use Bootstrap CSS class, that is container, and let's close this div before route closing. Let me align this. Okay, and then after div, let's create a switch element here and just close switch after list component. Yeah, here we go. So just follow the step. First comes router, after that we have created a div and then header component, and after that switch. Inside a switch we configure routes. Okay, great. So look at here, we have header and footer component created outside a switch because header and footer applicable to all the components, so we can keep header and footer components outside a switch element. Within a switch element, let's go ahead and let's configure routes. Let's create a route element, and route has attributes, for example path. So inside path we give a URL, that is slash. So this is the home page URL, and once we enter a URL something like localhost colon 3000 slash, then this corresponding component will get called. Route element has component attribute, so here we can configure a component, that is ListEmployeeComponent. So whenever we enter this URL in a browser, this corresponding component will get rendered. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and let's configure one more router. Let me copy this route and paste it here. So whenever we enter a URL in a browser something like this, localhost colon 3000 slash employees, then corresponding component will get rendered in a browser. So for that we have configured this router. Alright guys, we have successfully configured a routing in our employee management application. Now let's save this file and let's go back to the browser and let us test our routing in browser. Alright, let me go to the browser. Here in a new tab, just type localhost 3000 slash and hit enter. Yeah, here we go. So this is a home page. So we have configured a route for home page, right? So whenever we enter localhost colon 3000 slash, then ListEmployeeComponent will get rendered. And also we have configured a router for employees, right? So let's hit this link. Yeah, here we go. So whenever we enter a routing like slash employees path, the ListEmployeeComponent will get rendered in a page. Alright guys, we have successfully implemented a routing in our project. So look at here, header and footer. So there is a slight CSS changes we need to require. So let's go back to the VS Code, and here you can see here we can just remove this div. Let me remove this line div and this div. Alright, let's save the file and let's go back to the browser. We'll be able to see the header and footer aligned in a proper format. Alright guys, we have successfully configured routing in our employee management application. Going forward, whatever components we'll create in React application, we'll configure routes for them and we'll implement other functionality accordingly. Alright, great. Let's create add employee REST API. Open employee controller, and here just let me write the comment create employee REST API. Alright, just create a method first, public and employee. So this REST API returns a employee object as a JSON. So let's keep employee as a return type, and the name of the method is create employee, and just pass employee object as a method argument. Okay, and this method returns the employee object, right? So let's call employee repository dot save method. So save method return a employee object. So let's pass employee object as a method argument to the save method. Now we have created a method. Okay, let's use annotations to make this method as a REST endpoint. Let's use @post mapping annotation. So this method will handle HTTP post request, hence we are going to use @post mapping annotation. And let's configure URL over here /employees, and post request contains a JSON request body, right? And JSON request body we are going to directly map to the employee object. So let's use @ for that. Let's use @request body annotation. That's it guys, very simple REST API. Now what we'll do, we'll start the Tomcat server. That is, we'll just run our Spring Boot project and we'll test create employee REST API using Postman REST client. Now look at here, our Spring Boot application is up and running on embedded Tomcat server on port 08080. Now let's go back to the Postman REST client and let us test the API. So look at here, the HTTP method is post, and this is the REST endpoint URL, localhost 8080/API/v1/employees, and in a header just type content type as application/JSON, and in a body select a raw and give a JSON request body like this. First name Tom, last name Cruz, email ID tom@gmail.com. Hit send button. So look at here, we got a successful response with HTTP status true 100. Okay. Alright guys, we have successfully stored a record into a database. Let's go ahead and let's verify. Open MySQL Workbench and just execute select query on employees table. So look at here, a new record is successfully inserted into a database. Alright, now what we'll do, we'll add one more record. Let's give a post name as Amir and last name as Khan and email as amir@gmail.com and hit send button. So look at here, we got a response, and let's verify a record in a database table. Here we go. So look at here, record is added to the database. It's pretty simple. Alright, great, we have successfully created add employee REST API. So look at here, this is the page that we are going to design in next video. In this video we will just create a component and we add a route to the component, and we add a new button to the employees list page. Once we click on add employee button, then we should able to navigate to this page. Alright, in next video we will see how to design this add employee form, and in further videos we will see how to submit the add employee form to the REST API. So we make a REST API call, we send a form data to the REST API, and REST API internally store a form data in a MySQL database. And let's go to the components folder. Within the components folder, let's create a new file called create employee component.jsx. Alright guys, we have created a new file. Within a file, let's go ahead and let's create a component. Let's use React snippets to quickly create a React component. I am going to use rcc react snippet command. This will create a React class component. Hit enter. So look at here. Alright, now what we'll do, we'll configure a routing for this component. Go to the app.js file, and look at here, in previous video we have configured a router. Now let's go ahead and let's create one more route for create employee component. Let me quickly copy this route and paste it here, and whenever we hit the URL like localhost 3000/add employee, then add employee component will get rendered. For example, let's say add employee. So this is our path, and whenever we hit this path in a browser, we are going to render create employee component. Alright, got it? It's pretty simple, right? Let me delete this list employee component element. This is not required because we have already configured the routes. Delete this and save the file. We'll add a button over here, that is add employee button, and once we click on add employee button, that should navigate to the create employee component. let's go back to the VS Code ID and let's add a button over here. Let's go to the list employee component, and here let's create a button. Let's create a div, class name, and then just your Bootstrap CSS class name, that is a row. Inside this div, just create a button. Look at here, I just added a add employee button here. Here you can see some of the Bootstrap CSS classes for the button, and this is the event handler. So whenever I click on this button, this event handler method will get called, and this event handler method we need to bind inside a constructor. So I'm not going to cover event handling in React, so please spend few minutes to understand how the event handling works in the React. Alright, let's bind this method in a constructor. So this is basically there are basically different ways to bind event handlers in React, but this is the recommended way to bind event in a constructor. And let's create add employee method. Now what we'll do, whenever we click on add employee button, then we should navigate to the create employee component, right? For that, let's configure a routing over here. Let's say this dot props dot history dot push and then slash add hyphen employee. Whenever we click on an employee button, then this route will get called, and corresponding to this route we have configured a component called create employee component. Open a app.js file. You can able to see here, whenever we hit this URL in browser, then this component will get rendered, right? So this is what we have configured over here. So you might be wondering what is this history and how it works. Alright, great, let me quickly explain you. We have configured a React router in app.js file, right? So React router basically maintains a history object, and this history object has all the mappings of the routings. Okay, and React router passes history object to each router as a props, so we can access history object using props. So React router basically provides history object for each route through props, and we can get history object using props. This history object makes us manually control the history of the browser. Okay, I hope you got the idea how we can configure or how we can redirect to the respective components using history object, and we basically get a history object from the props, and we can just configure the URL like this. Let me go to the create employee component, and inside that let me write some text over here. I write something like employee form, and let's save this file, and let's go back to the browser and just click on add employee button. Let me refresh first and click on add employee button. It is not redirecting to the add employee page, right? So let me see what is the issue. Let's go to the routing configuration. So here basically we need to add a extract exact attribute, because if you don't specify exact, then routing will try to invoke all the components. So whenever you want to navigate to the particular component, and mention exact here. Okay, exact, so it means that you are redirecting to the exact route. Okay, now let's save this file. Let's go back to the browser and you will be able to see the employee form. So we have successfully navigated to create employee component. Let's design employee form. Let's go back to the VS Code and let's go to the create employee component, and here we are going to design an employee form. Let's delete this. Let's create a div and let's add a CSS like container. Within a div, let's create one more div and let's add a CSS like row within a div. Let's add one more div and let's add some CSS. So look at here the form. So we should align the form at the center of the page. Okay, and we have to add a CRUD here. CRUD means the border to this form. So to achieve this, we are going to add these CSS, Bootstrap CSS classes. Okay, great. After that, we need to add this text, right? This page title, that is add employee. For that, let me add a S3 tag here. So this should be text should be aligned at a center, and after that, let's add a CRUD body. Let's create a div. Okay, and inside this div, let's create a form, and inside a form, let's go ahead and let's create a input fields. Okay, great. So look at here, we have first name, last name, and employee. So these are the input fields we are going to create in a form. Let's create a div, and then let's add a CSS class like form group, and after that, let's add a label. Let's say first name, and then input field. So look at here the input field. We have added a placeholder, that is first name and name, and then class. This is the Bootstrap CSS class, and the value. We have a state inside a component, right? So we have to create attributes here, properties for this state, like first name, last name, and email ID. So go to the state and let's create a first name, and let's initialize empty, and also create a last name. Let's name property initialize to empty, and let's go ahead and let's also create email ID property, and let's initialize to empty. Alright guys, now these basically properties will help us to get the form data, and this data will be available in a form submission. Alright, got it? So we have to add this property to the state, and the input field, we get a data from the input field inside these properties, and this properties data will be available while form submission. So try to understand the flow. So inside a state, we create fields or properties, and these properties we use to store the input form data, input field form data, and these properties will available in a form submission. Alright guys, so look at here. At the very first time, the first name is empty, so you can able to see a empty input text field, and once we enter something in a input text field, then this event handler will get called. Let me quickly create this event handler here. Let me capture the event here. Alright, so this is the event, and From the event we can get a value like event.target.value, and we can assign this value to the first name. So look at here the flow. Inside the state we have defined a properties called post name and it is empty, and here inside the input field we have a value, and we have here added a first name, and at the very first time the first name is empty, and as soon as we enter something in a text field, then this event handler will get called, and we have will extract a value from this input field from the event, and we use setState method to add the value to the first name, and now we can able to see the value of the first name inside a input text field. So this is the flow. Okay, got it. Now similarly let's go ahead and let's create an input field for last name and email. Let me copy and paste here, and let's change this accordingly. Last name, and here placeholder as last name, and this is the last name. Change last name handler, and this is the last name. Alright, great. Now let's create an event handler for change last name handler. Let me just copy this and paste here, and just change from post name to last name. Alright guys, so one more important thing is we need to bind this event handler in a constructor. Go to the constructor, within constructor just type this, and then let's use bind method to bind this event handler to the component. Bind and pass this reference. Similarly let's also bind a handler method, that is change post name handler method. And they pass this reference. Alright guys, now let's go back to the form and let's copy this, and let's also add one more field called email address. Let's change placeholder from last name to email address, and also label email address. Alright, and also name from last name to email ID. Let's change this handler method, that is change event handler. Let me change this label, let's say email ID. After that let's go ahead and let's implement this change email handler over here. Let me copy the existing method, let's paste here, and let's copy the name of the change email handler over here, and just change email ID. That's it guys. Now once we have created first name, last name, email ID input fields, now it's time to create a submit button, submit and cancel button. It's pretty simple. Go to the form, and here let me add two buttons. So look at here, this is the button to save the employee data. Alright, and this is the cancel button, and here we have added an event handler. So whenever we click on save button, then this event handler will get called. Let's go ahead and let's bind this event handler in a constructor. You can directly bind this event handler here also. For example, look at here, for cancel method I have just added bind method here. So you can use this approach, or you can also in a constructor you can also bind this event handler in a constructor. So this is the recommended way, and this is recommended by a React team, and if you can see this approach in a React documentation as well. Bind and then pass this. Alright guys, let me create a save employee method here. and just call prevent default. After that, so we have defined properties right inside a state. So once we enter something in these fields, then properties will get updated the data using set state method here. And now the first name, last name, email ID, so this property has a data. So let's get data from these properties while form submission. So here save employee method, right? So this method will get called whenever we hit the save button or whenever we submit the form. So let's go ahead and let's get the data from this property here inside a save employee method. Let me quickly create an employee JavaScript object and let me add a data to the object. For example, look at here, this is employee JavaScript object, and this first name I have retrieved a first name from the state, last name from the state, email ID from the state, and I just added console.log over here so that we can able to see the form data in a console. Alright guys, we have almost completed add employee form and the event handling for input fields and form submission. Alright, now let's save the form and let's go back to the browser and let's see if there are any errors. Or so before that, let me check if anything missing over here. So we have added change first name handler, and we have just bind that event handler in a constructor, and similarly for change last name handler we have also bind this event handler in a constructor. And let me change the name over here. Okay, and let me check if anything missing. Alright, we are good. One more thing is this is cancel method, right? So we haven't created cancel method over here. So let me create cancel method, and then once we click on cancel button, this should navigate to the employee list page, right? And let me just copy the routing URL, go to the list employee component, and let me copy this. Alright, so here let me change the path URL like employees. So whenever we click on cancel button, this should navigate to the /employee URL, and so list employee component will get rendered on this URL. Alright guys, let me save the file and let me go back to the browser and let us see if there are any errors. No errors. Alright, let me just refresh. Yeah, here we go. We have successfully added add employee page to our employee management application. Let me hit cancel button. Yeah, we are able to go to the employees list page. Alright, now what we'll do, we'll fill up the details and we'll able to see the data is available while form submission. Okay, great. Enter first name as Ramesh, last name as Fodatare, email address as here we automatically get a last name in our email field, right? So let me go back to the VS Code and let me change. Yeah, here basically it is email ID. Let's save the file and let's go back to the browser and let's refresh, and let's again enter first name Ramesh, last name Fodatare, email address as ramesh@gmail.com. hit save and let us see. Yeah, here we go. We have successfully got first name, last name, email ID data from the state of the object, and we have printed the employee form data on a console. Alright guys, we have successfully created a form and we have successfully got the data of the form while form submission. In next video we'll create the REST client, which we'll call a REST API, and we submit this form in a database. We just call a REST API and we send this form data to the REST API, and REST API will internally store the data in a MySQL database. Alright guys, in previous video we have created add employee form and we have stored form data in first name, last name and email ID properties, and we are able to get the data from these properties while form submission. Okay, so look at here, I just entered first name, last name, email ID, and when I click on save button I can able to get a form data in save employee method. Okay, now what we will do, we'll make a REST API call and we send employee data to the REST API, and REST API will store this data in a MySQL database. We have already created and exposed add employee REST API in one of the previous video. So we are going to call create employee REST API and we will send this data to the REST API. Alright guys, so in order to do that, first we need to create a REST client using Axio's HTTP library. Go to the employee service.js file, and we have already created a get employee method which will call all employee REST API. Okay, now similarly let's go ahead and let's create one more method over here, like create employee, and just pass employee object as a method argument, and then return Axios dot post. So we are going to call post method here because this is the form submission. So once we submit the form, we have to send form data to the REST API through post HTTP method, and then REST API will handle form data at the server side and it will store the form data in a database. Alright, let's pass a base URL over here. After that we need to pass a form data, that is employee. That's it. Next, go to the create employee component. Okay, so go to the save employee method. Inside this method we are going to call employee service and then call create employee and pass employee object. So Axios post method returns promise, so let's go ahead and let's call then method and then response. And inside this then method, what we'll do, we'll navigate to the employees list page. So once we submit a form data successfully, then we should navigate to the employees list page, right? For that, here what we'll do, we'll just call this dot props dot history. Let's get a history object from the route using props. So we got a success response from the REST API. We should navigate to the employees list page. Okay, great. Let us save all the files, create component, create employee component as well as employee service, and then let's go back to the browser and let us see how it works. Yeah, here we go. Just refresh one more time and let's add data to the form. First name as Ramesh, last name as Furtare, email ID as ramesh@gmail.com. hit save button. Yeah, here we go. So we have successfully added a new employee to the employees list. Alright guys, what we have done, we have created create employee method inside employee service. So this will make a REST API call, and inside a create employee component we have used employee service and its method called create employee, and we just pass the employee object to this method. And after the successful response of the REST API, we just navigated to the employees list page. It's pretty simple, right? Great. In next video, we'll create few REST APIs like get employee by ID REST API and update employee REST API, and then after that we'll create a React components to consume the REST APIs. Alright guys, let's create get employee by ID REST API. Get employee by ID REST API. Okay, just type a method public, and this method returns employee object to the client. So let's give return type as employee, and let's give method name as get employee by ID. Alright, and we are going to pass ID as a method argument, right? Long ID. Let's annotate this method with @get mapping annotation, and let's configure the REST endpoint URL over here, employees/ID. Okay, so this is the path variable. Now we want to map, or we want to store this ID value into the Java variable. So for that we are going to use @path variable annotation to map this ID with this variable. So let's use @path variable annotation. Now let's retrieve a employee object from the database. For that we are going to use employee repository. Let's create an employee object here, and let's use employee repository, and we're gonna call find by ID, right? Find by ID method, and just pass ID to the find by method. So look at here, find by ID returns optional as a return type. So here what we'll do, we'll use dot or else throw method. So if record not exist in database, then we are going to throw resource not found exception. For that let's use or else throw method over here, and basically we need to pass a lambda expression to this method, because this method internally uses functional interfaces. Okay, and we use lambda expression to implement a functional interface. Let's use lambda expression syntax here, and just pass object of the custom exception, that is resource not found exception. A resource not found exception, and just pass the custom message over here, employee not exist with ID, and just pass the ID over here. Let me break this statement. Okay, great. So what we have done, we have called find by ID method. So this method basically returns optional object as a return type, and optional provides or else throw method. So if record not exist in database, then we just simply throw resource not found exception like this. Now let's return a employee object to the client. So what we'll do, we need to also return HTTP status, right? For that we need to use a response entity class. Let's use return type as response entity, and this is the generic class. So let's pass employee as a generic type, and here let's return response entity, and we are going to return a OK status, that is 200 status. So let's choose OK, and just pass employee object in a body. That's it. It's pretty simple, right? Alright guys, this is pretty simple REST API, that is get employee by ID REST API. Now let's go ahead and let's test this REST API. For that, what we will do, I will start the application, go to the Spring Boot application main class, right click, run as Spring Boot app. Now look at here, Spring Boot application is up and running on embedded Tomcat server on port 080. Now let's go back to the Postman REST client and let us test this REST API. Open a new tab and just type localhost 8080/API/v1/employees, and here we are going to retrieve a particular employee. So let's go back to the database. So I am going to get an employee Ramesh with ID 1. So let's pass ID 1 as a path variable /1 and choose HTTP GET method over here and simply hit send button. So this will retrieve a employee object with ID 1. If you want to retrieve employee with ID 2, just pass ID 2 over here and just hit send button. So this will retrieve a employee with ID 2. Alright guys, we have successfully created get employee by ID REST API and we have tested using Postman REST client. Now let's create update employee REST API. Go to the employee controller. Within employee controller, let me just write the comment here, update employee REST API. Okay, so just follow the steps, public and response entity, and just pass type as employee, and let's give a method name as update employee. Okay, make this E as caps, and we are going to pass ID as a method argument, along with that the object of the employee class. So basically client sends updated employee object in a request body. For that we are going to use employee object here. Now what we'll do, we'll use annotations over here. So let's use put mapping annotation for update operation. So this method will basically handles a put request. For that we are going to use @put mapping annotation. Let's configure REST endpoint URL over here /employees/ just pass a path variable here, that is ID. Now let's map this path variable with a Java variable by using @path variable annotation. And also we are going to directly map a request JSON object into a Java object. For that we are going to use @request body annotation. Pretty simple, right? Great. So to update an employee, first we need to retrieve an existing employee from the database. For that what we will do, we will reuse this code. Just copy this code. So this will basically retrieve employee by ID. If employee is not exist in database, then it simply throws resource not found exception. So look at here, this is the duplicate local variable employee. Here just pass this as let's rename this object as employee details. Now what we'll do, we'll update this retrieved employee object with a request employee object. Okay, just change the first name, employee details dot get first name. Similarly, let's also change last name, employee details dot get last name, employee dot set email ID, and let's get an email ID from the employee details object and set to the employee object. Now once we set all the information that we want to update to the employee object, we simply save this employee object to the database. Let's go ahead and let's save this updated employee object to the database. Let's use save method and just pass the employee object as a method argument, and here we store the updated employee object in a separate employee variable, and we simply return this object to the client. For that, just use return response entity dot OK. So this is 200 status, and in a body just type updated employee. Alright guys, that is pretty much. So what we have done, we have retrieved an employee from the database, and we have added all the updated information to the employee object, and we have stored that employee object into a database, and we have just returned an updated employee object to the client. Pretty simple REST API. Now let's run the Spring Boot project and let's test this REST API using Postman REST client. Alright guys, Spring Boot application is running on Tomcat server on port 8080. Let's go back to the Postman REST client. Go to the new tab and just type localhost 8080/API/v1/employees, and this is the update REST API. So select put HTTP method and go to the header, and we are sending JSON as a request body, right? So for that, let's use content type as application/JSON, and I can go back to the body. In a body where you're sending a JSON, right? So let me copy the JSON object from the post request and let me paste in a body, and what we'll do is simply update an employee, that is a Ramesh employee. Let me show you that. Go back to the MySQL workbench. So look at here, this is the table. It has 4 records. We are going to update the employee with ID 1. Okay, that is a Ramesh employee. So let's pass ID here to the URL as a path variable, and I'm going to update a first name from Ramesh to Ram, and last name from Patare to something like Jadhav, and email ID from ramesh@gmail.com to ram@gmail.com. So look at here, first name is Ramesh, last name Patare, email ID ramesh@gmail.com, right? So I'm going to update these details with these details. Okay, so once you configure all the details, hit send button. Yeah, here we go. So look at here the response. We got an updated record in a response, and we have successfully updated first name, last name, and email address. Let's verify in a table. So let's query the select statement here. So look at here, a record, first record is get successfully updated. Alright guys, we have successfully created updated REST API, and we have also tested it using Postman REST client. In this video, let's head over to the React application and let's create update employee component, and let's design update employee form, and in next video we'll make a REST API call to store updated employee form data into the database. Update employee page looks similar to add employee page, so it's good idea to reuse the existing component to perform both add and edit employee operations. For example, in previous video we have created create employee component to add a new employee to the employee list, right? And update employee page also looks same as add employee page. So what we can do is we can reuse this component to perform both add and update employee operations. So there are basically two approaches. Either we can use a same component to perform add and update employee operations, or we can create a separate update React component to perform update employee operation. Yes, this is a common requirement, so I'm going to show you both the approach. In the first approach, we'll create a separate update employee component to implement update employee functionality, and then once we complete this update employee functionality, then I'm going to show you the second approach, that is reusing the same component to perform both add and update employee functionality. Okay, alright guys, let's go ahead and let's create a new React component called update employee component. For that, go to the components folder. Within the components folder, let's create a file called update employee component.jsx. Alright, within this file, let's use a React snippet to create a React class component. I am going to use rcc react snippet command to create a React class component. Here we go. So once we create update employee component, then what we will do, we will configure a route for this component. So let's head over to app.js file, and here let's go ahead and let's copy this route and paste, and just change the route path here, that is update. In case of update, we need to get an ID, right? So for that, look at here how it looks. The route looks like this. So this ID should be dynamically get changed, so we have to give a syntax to update a route like this. Alright, the corresponding component is update employee component. So whenever we hit the URL something like this, localhost colon 3000 and then update employee /1. So whenever we hit the URL like this, then this component will get called, and this ID we retrieve like this. Okay, so this colon ID, so this is the syntax to get the ID here. So this is kind of a path variable, so this ID should be dynamically get changed. Okay, got it. Once we configure a route for update employee component, let's go ahead and let's add update button to the list employee component. Okay, so look at here, this is the employees list page, right? And here at actions column, you can see we haven't added update and delete buttons yet. So let's go ahead and let's add update button to the actions column. Let's go back to VS Code ID and go to the list employee component, and this is the actions header column, and go to the table body, and here we have to add update employee button. Let's go ahead and let's add it. It's button, in a button element let's add on click attribute, and then within the curly braces let's add an event handler. Let's add arrow function. So whenever we want to pass ID, then make sure that we have to use arrow function, and just call this dot, let us say edit employee, the handler method name, and then here we're gonna pass employee dot ID. Alright, after that let's add some CSS to the button, like this is the Bootstrap CSS, and then let's add a name to the button like update, and save it, and let's go back to the browser and let us see how it looks. Yeah, here we go, it looks good, right? Now once we click on update button, it should navigate to the update employee component. Alright, it means that whenever we click on update button, so this should navigate to the update employee page. Let's go ahead and let's add on click event handler to navigate to the update employee page. Let's go back to the VS Code ID. Let's copy the method name, and here below constructor just create a method, define the method edit employee. We should also need to bind this method to the component. Let's go to the constructor and let's bind this method to the component using bind method and just pass this keyword. Alright, so this method should have the method argument id, so because we are passing id here. Alright, after that, so once we click on update button, so this should navigate to the update employee page, right? And we also need to pass this id. So we have already configured a route for this. So look at here, so we need to pass id to the route. How to do it? Let me show you. Go to the list employee component again, and here just type this dot. We're going to use history object again, this dot props dot history, and then push. And here, so look at here the symbol, so this is the backstick I'm going to use. So you should make sure that you have added backstick here, and then slash update employee slash dollar and then id. Alright, so this is the syntax to pass id to the path, that is the URL. Alright, got it? So here this is the push method. Okay, let's change it, and this is the syntax to call update employee page. So whenever user hit update button, the user should be able to navigate to the update employee page, and we should have to pass this id dynamically to update employee page. So this is the syntax for the same. Now let's head over to update employee component. So update employee page should looks like add employee page. So let's go to the create employee component and let's copy all the code. Okay, so that's why I have already mentioned, like, we can reuse this same component to add employee and update employee. To keep it simple, I'm going to use a separate component for updating an employee. So let's copy this entire code up to this and go to the update employee component, and let's go ahead and let's replace this code. Okay, great. The code is almost same as we have already understood in previous video while creating add employee form in create employee component. Alright guys, now what we'll do, we'll make a REST API call to get an employee for updation. So we just call employee by id REST API, and we pass id employee id to the REST API, and this REST API returns a employee object, and that employee object will populate in a form, and inside a form we can able to update the employee, and once we hit save button, then we can able to call the REST API, and we pass all the employee updated data to the REST API, and REST API internally store a form data in a database. So here we need to make some changes. So in order to understand this code, please visit my previous video. I have already explained this code step by step. We have already developed this code line by line. Now let's make some changes over here. So instead of save employee, let's go ahead and let's rename this from save employee to update employee. Okay, and let's also refactor the code. Go to the constructor. Within the constructor we have bind event handler to the component, right? So let's change from save employee to update employee. Alright, now what we'll do, we'll call component did mount method and we'll make a REST API call. So before that, let's go to the employee service.js file, and here we need to create a method which will call a REST API. Let's create a method get employee by ID and just pass employee ID. So this is the HTTP get method. So let's call axios.get method and then pass base URL and then pass employee ID. It's pretty simple, right? So this will return a employee. Now let's go back to the update employee component, and here after the constructor we call component did mount method, and inside this method we're gonna call service method. Okay, employee service dot get employee by ID. And one more important thing is we have to get ID, right? We have to get ID from the route. So for that, let's declare ID here. We can get ID from the props. Okay, so look at here, the props dot match dot params dot ID. So by using this approach, we can get ID from the route, and this ID we are going to pass over here, this dot state dot ID. Alright, then this method returns a promise. So let's call then method, and inside then method we get a response and flat arrow, and inside then method let's get a data from the response. So this is a employee, and let's say response dot data. So let's get a data into a separate object. Now what we'll do, we'll set a data to the state by using set state method, and we have first name attribute. Let's get a data from the employee dot first name, and then we have property last name. Okay, what we have done, we have retrieved a response from the method, and we just set that response data to the state by using set state method. Now form should populated with first name, last name and email ID. So let's go ahead and let's change update employee method. So whenever user update the employee form and hit save button, then update employee method will get called, and inside update employee method we capture the update employee form data. And let's delete this, and once we got updated employee form data, we just simply log to the console using console.log. And in the next video we'll make a update employee REST API call, and we'll send this updated employee form data to the REST API, and REST API internally will store this data into a database. Let's save all the files. Let's go back to the browser and let's see how this functionality works. Alright guys, so look at here, update button is there in a employee list page. So let's go ahead and let's click on update button. Yeah, here we go. So we also need to update this text, right? Let's update this text. Go to the VS Code ID and let's change from add employee to update employee and save it. And let's go back to the browser Yeah, here we go. Alright, we have successfully made a REST API call to get a employee object by ID, and we have populated that employee object in a form. Now user can able to update the employee. Let's go ahead and let's update. I'm going to update post name from Tom to John, and last name from Cruz to Sina, and also email ID from tom@gmail.com to sina@gmail.com, and clear the console and just hit save button. And yeah, look at here, we got a updated employee from data here. Alright, we have successfully updated the employee, and in next video we make a REST API call and we send this updated employee data through the REST API, and internally REST API will put this data into a database. Alright guys, I will see you in the next video. Previous video we have added update button over here. I click on update button, so this makes a REST API call to get a employee object by ID, and that object will be populated in the form for editing. Alright, in this video we will make a REST API call to send the updated employee from data, and REST API internally store this updated employee data into MySQL database. Alright guys, let's head over to VS Code IDE and let's write a code to make a REST API call to send the updated employee data. In order to write a REST client code using Axios library, open employeeservice.js file. Within a JS file, go to the class, and inside a class we are going to create a method called update employee, and then we are going to pass the parameter called employee comma employee ID. Within update employee method, just we are going to return a promise object of Axios put method. Just type return and then Axios and then call put method. So we are going to send a HTTP put request. For that we are going to use put method here, and then base URL followed by slash and then concatenation operator and then employee ID comma employee object. So look at here the order. So first we pass a base URL as a first argument, and second argument is employee object to the method put. Alright, so this base URL should looks like this. For example, localhost 8080 API v1/employees/1. So this is the employee ID that we are going to pass. Alright, we have created a REST client using Axios. Now we are going to use this method in a component. Let's go back to update employee component and go to the update employee method over here, and look at here, this is the employee object that we have prepared, and this employee object has all the employee updated data. Employee service, and then call update employee method, and then pass employee object comma ID. So how we can get the ID? Just type this dot state dot ID. Okay, great. And Axios returns a promise object, so we can use then method here, and inside then method we can call a response object, and then flat arrow syntax. Once the employee is successfully updated, then we should navigate to the employees list page, right? For that, let's write the router here, this dot props. So from the props we can get history object, and then call push method, and here just pass the router path, that is /employees. It's pretty simple, right? I have already explained you how the history object associated with the router that you can understand by visiting previous videos. Alright guys, pretty much let's save the files and let's go back to the browser and let's see how it works. Go to the browser and just refresh, and let's go ahead and let's update one of the employee. So I'm going to update the employee called Ramesh, this one. Let's change from Ramesh to Ram, and also the email ID from Ramesh to ram@gmail.com, and hit save. Yeah, here we go. We have successfully updated Ramesh employee from Ramesh to Ram, and email address also from ramesh@gmail.com to ram@gmail.com. Alright guys, we have successfully made a REST API call, and we have sent employee updated data through REST API, and we have successfully completed update employee implementation. In next video we will see how to reuse the same component to perform add and edit employee operations. So now in this approach we have created a separate update employee component, right? And update employee component has almost same code as we have implemented in create employee component. So it's a common requirement to have reuse the same component. So ideally we should reuse the existing component, right? For that, in the next video I'm going to show you how to reuse the same component to perform both add and edit employee operations. Alright guys, I will see you in the next video. In this video I am going to show you how to reuse the existing React component to perform add and update employee operation. In previous video we have created separate update employee component to perform update employee operation, right? So in this video I want to show you how to reuse a existing, that is create employee component to perform add and update employee operation. So this is not a good idea to create a separate component and copy the existing code. Alright, so we have replicated a same code, almost same code in update employee component from create employee component, right? So now what we can do is we can just perform add and update employee operation in a single component. So let me show you how to do it. And this is one of the common requirement to to implement add and update operation in a single page or in a single component. Okay, let's go and let's see how to do it. Just follow the steps. Go to the app.js file, and inside the app.js file we have configured routing. So in case of update operation, the route looks like this. We have to pass /:id in order to get ID of the particular employee. So first of all, let me comment out this line of code, because we are not going to use update employee component. We are going to use create employee component to perform add and update employee operations. Here create employee component should need employee ID in order to perform update employee operation. For that, let's go ahead and let's copy this code, this ID here, and let's add it. So now look at here, this is how the path looks like to perform add and update operation. Now the important thing is we need to have a flag to distinguish whether we are performing add operation or update operation. So we have to maintain a flag. Let's say we maintain a -1, let's say. So whenever we pass -1 here, it means that this is the request for add employee operation. And let's say if we pass any positive number 1 2 3 4 so on, then we can consider it as the request is for update operation. So because employee ID is always a positive number, if you go to the database, a database will automatically generate ID for each employee, right, in a database table. So the ID is always gonna positive. We can have a -1 as a flag or a value to distinguish between add and update operation. Otherwise you can also use underscore id. So you can use this value to distinguish between add and update employee. Okay, so whatever the flag you can use, but make sure that the flag should not be a positive number, because employee id is always a positive number and which we use to perform update operation. All right, so configure route like this. So this is the first step, and second step is go to the update employee component. So this code we have understood in previous videos, and to perform update operation we should have a id, right? So we can get id from the route. So look at here, we have added id property to the state object, and we have retrieved id from the route by using this .props.match.params and the id. All right, so let me just copy this code and go to the create employee component and just paste inside a state object. Okay, so this is the second step. Step 2. So let me write a comment here also. This is the step 1. Okay, now once we got id, then based on the id we can write the logic. If id is -1, then the request is for add employee, and if the id is any positive number, then we can say that the request is for update operation. All right, great. Now in case of update operation, we should have an employee object, and that employee object will populate in a form for editing. So in order to do that, we have already written a code in an update employee component, right? So here, look at here, this is the component didMount method. So inside that we have made a REST API call. So inside the employee service we have written get employee by id method, which will internally call a REST API by using axios.get method. So this is the request for getting a employee object by id. Alright guys, let me quickly copy this and go to the create employee component, and just below constructor paste it. So this is the step 3. Okay, so this is the step 3, just get a employee object by id. Okay, now the fourth step is, once we got id, based on the id we can decide whether the request is for add or update employee, right? So let's go ahead and let's add a condition here inside component didMount method. This is a step 4. If id is equals -1, this dot state.id equal to -1, then we don't fetch a employee object by id, we simply return it. Okay, in else condition we simply move this code. All right, great. If the id is -1, then we don't do anything, we simply return. In a else condition we should get an employee object by id, because in else condition always if the id is positive, then the control always comes inside a else condition, and this is for update employee operation. Alright guys, now in fourth step we got an employee object in case of update employee, and then that employee is populated in the form. Now let's say employee edit the form and hit save button, then this event handler will get called. Okay, and inside this save employee method we need to decide whether the form is for add employee or update employee. For that, let's go ahead and just add the condition here. Let me quickly copy this condition. This is the step 5. Okay, if the id is equal to -1, then we simply call create employee method and we pass the employee object. So this is for add employee operation, and in else condition we call a method called update employee method, and we pass employee object and ID. For example, go to the employee update employee component, and here inside update employee method we have already written the logic. Let me just copy this code and go to the else condition and paste it here. So look at here, if ID is equal to -1, then we call create employee method and we pass employee object to it. So this will internally call add employee REST API, and it will send employee data to the REST API, and REST API internally save the add employee form data. And in case of else condition, we call update employee method. So this internally call update employee REST API, and it will pass a employee object. This is the updated employee information and the ID. Alright, and REST API will internally update a employee information in the database. Now let's save all the files and let's go back to the browser and let's see how it works. In a browser, just refresh the URL, and this is the add employee button. So once we click on add employee button, it should navigate to the add employee page, right? So go ahead and click on add employee button. So look at here, it won't work because we have used single route to perform add and update operations, right? We have to provide here /-1, and we should be able to get add employee page. Alright, so let's change the add employee event handler code. Go to the VS Code and go to the list employee component, and here we have a add employee button, and this is the add employee event handler. So once we click on add employee button, then add employee event handler will get called, and here basically we need to provide /-1. Okay, if you save the file and go back to the browser, and once you click on add employee button, you should able to navigate to the add employee page. Alright guys, great. Now let us test update employee functionality. So if you click on update button, it won't work because we are using update-employee route here. Okay, and we have commented out this route in app.js file. Let me show you. Go to the app.js file and look at here, this is the route we have already commented, and we are using add-employee path for add and update operation. So let's go to the list employee component and go to the update button, and once we click on update button, edit employee event handler will get called, and this is update-employee. So let's go ahead and let's change it from update employee to add employee. Save it and let's go back to the browser, refresh the link. So let's go ahead and let's click on update button. Yeah, here we go. We have successfully navigate to the update employee page, but still we need some changes over here. This is the update employee page. Still we can see here add employee text. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's change this title. Let's go back to the VS Code and let's go to the create employee component, and let me just copy this ID, and here we need to add the condition. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll simply create a method over here like get title, something like this, and here we simply write the condition. If id equal to -1, then we simply return that the page title like add employee. In else condition, we simply return update employee, and let's get this employee title. Let's call this employee title here. So this is the JSX, so we can write a JavaScript code inside it, write the curly braces and just call this method. Alright, let's save the file and let's go back to the browser. Oops, there is some error over here. Let's see what is the error. Line number 73, go to the VS Code, go to the line number 73. Yes, so here return keyword is missing. Let's save the file and let's go back to the browser. Yeah, here we go. Alright, we have successfully added a condition to update the text over here. Alright guys, now what we will do, we will update the employee. So I'm going to update this Ramesh employee. Click on update button and let's change from first name from Ramesh to Ram, and email ID from Ramesh to ram@gmail.com, and hit save. Yeah, here we go. Post name and employee ID is changed. Alright, we have successfully updated an employee. Alright guys, we have successfully performed add and update employee in a single component. And this is one of the important requirement. So whenever you implement a code operation in your project, always try to reuse the existing component. Don't create a separate component like we have created a update employee component and we have almost duplicated all the code which is already there in a create employee component. This is not a good practice. Alright, so always try to reuse the existing code. Don't duplicate code in your project. Alright guys, again you can refactor something like this is the save employee method, but this method does two things. One is for add employee, another is update employee. So you can rename this method like save or update employee. Let me quickly refactor save or update, and let's refactor this name in a required places. Go to the constructor and here also just rename it and save it. Yeah, that is pretty much. Let's say if you don't want to use -1, what you can do is you can just go to the list employee component and here you have add employee button, right? So on click up add employee button, add employee event handler will get called, and go to the add employee event handler and here we have added -1. So let's replace from -1 to _add. Okay, and let me show you where the changes required. So where you have added -1, just go ahead and add the string _add. And so look at here, this is the operator that we use to just check whether these two strings are equal or not. Go to this condition and just replace here. Okay, great. Let's save the files. Let's go back to the browser and refresh the URL and click on add employee. So look at here the route _add. So in case of add employee, you should be able to see like this. So we got update employee, right? So let me quickly here we have missed one more condition. Let me just change it. Alright, great. Yeah, here we go. So look at here this route add employee /_add. Okay, so if request comes like this, then add employee page will get populated, and in case of update the route looks like this. So this should be a ID and it should be a positive number in case of update. Alright, that is pretty much about how to reuse the existing component to perform add and update operations. I hope you got some idea. So I believe that you utilize this idea in your projects. Let's develop delete employee REST API. Go to the employee controller. Within the employee controller, we are going to develop delete employee REST API. Delete employee REST API. Alright, just follow the steps. Just create a method first, public. So we are going to return a deleted employee with status message, right? For that, just return a map as a response. Just give key as string and value as boolean, and let's give method name as delete employee, and let's pass id as method argument, long id, and let's use @delete mapping annotation. So this method will handle or delete HTTP request. For that, we are going to use @delete mapping annotation, and let's go ahead and let's configure the REST endpoint URL employees / id as a path variable. And now we are going to map this id with the Java variable, right? That is a long type. For that, we are going to use @path variable annotation. It's pretty simple. So in order to delete the employee, first we need to get an existing employee with id, right? So let me reuse this code. So first we'll retrieve an employee with the id. If employee with this particular id is not exist in database, then we simply throw the resource not found exception. It's pretty simple. Again, we just simply pass the employee object to the delete method. So here we're going to use the employee repository, and we're going to call a delete method, and we pass an employee object to the delete method. So this will delete a particular employee, and look at here the return type of delete method, it is a void. Okay, now what we'll do, we'll simply create a map object to simply return like a message deleted as a true, key as a string, and value as boolean. So we need to notify to the client something like the record is deleted successfully, right? For that, we are going to just return deleted as true or false. Okay, just give reference as response, and this is a cosa hash map, and response dot put. So let's put our entry here. So we're gonna say key as deleted, response as the value as true. Okay, and return response entity dot okay, and just in a body just pass a response. So again, we have to specify response entity as a return type here. Alright, that is pretty much what we have done. Let me stop the server. We have retrieved a employee with ID, particular ID from the database. If record is not exist, then we simply throw the resource not found exception, and we have called a delete method of employee repository, and we pass employee object to the delete method. This will delete a employee, and delete method does not return anything. So we simply create a map with a entry as deleted true, and we simply return that map to the client. It's pretty simple REST API. Now let's start our Spring Boot project, and let us test delete employee REST API using Postman REST client. Alright guys, our application is up and running on embedded Tomcat server on port 8080. Now we'll delete a particular employee. Let me show you here in our MySQL workbench. So look at here, we have 4 records in a table. So we are going to delete a record 1, the record with ID 1. Okay, we are going to delete this particular record. Go back to the Postman REST client and go to the new tab here, and just type localhost /8080/API/v1/employees, and we are going to call a delete REST API. For that, we are going to choose a delete HTTP method here, and we are going to delete a record with ID 1. So let's pass 1 here as a path variable and hit send button. So look at here, the status 200, and a record is successfully deleted, and we got a deleted true as a response. Let's verify it in a database. So let me quickly run this query, select query, and look at here a particular record is successfully deleted from the table. Let's delete one more record. So we are going to delete a record with ID 2. So let's go back to the Postman client and just pass 2 here, hit send button. Yeah, here we go, we got a success response. Let's verify, let's execute select statement. Here we go, the record is deleted successfully. Alright, that is pretty much about delete employee REST API. We have successfully developed delete employee REST API, and we have tested it using Postman REST client. In previous video we have completed update employee feature, and in previous video I have also created delete employee REST API. In this video let's head over to React application and let's implement delete employee functionality. So ideally what we are going to do is we are going to add a button over here in the actions column, just beside update button, and once we click on delete button, the corresponding employee should get deleted, and internally it makes a REST API call to delete the employee from the database. Alright, let's go ahead and let's implement delete employee functionality. First we will add a button here. Okay, let's go to the VS ID and if you see, this is the table and this is the actions column, and we have already added a update employee button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this button and just paste it here, and let's change from edit to delete employee. So this is the on-click property of button element, and this is the arrow function, and here I'm gonna change the CSS class name, like I'm gonna say button danger, and also change button label, let's say delete. That's it, and let's define a delete employee event handler. Alright, let's bind this event handler to the component in a constructor. This dot delete employee equals to this dot delete employee, and then bind, and then pass this keyword. And let's go ahead and let's define this method here and just pass ID, because this ID we are passing here employee.id, right? Great. Now here we'll make a REST API call. We just write the code here to make a REST API call. I'm going to make a delete employee REST API call from here inside this method. So before that, let's save the file and let's go back to the browser, and you can able to see here a delete button is added in actions column. Okay, so let's add some inline style to just give here margin left. Go to the VS Code ID, and in a button, delete button, here I will just add an inline style. So look at here how we can add the inline style. So this is a style equals to curly braces, and this is the object, and this is the key, and this is the value. So look at here the property, this is the attribute in object. So this should be in a camel case. So we define attributes in a React like this, okay, in a camel case. Alright, let's save the file and let's go back to the browser. Here you can able to see there is a little bit margin between these two buttons. Now what we'll do, we'll add a code to make a REST API call. Let's go to the employee service, and here we're gonna write the method to make a REST API call. Let's say delete employee, and then pass employee ID. This is the delete HTTP request. So let's call axios.delete method, and then pass base URL. After that, let's concatenate this with slash and then employee ID. That's it. And let's call this method from the component. Let's go back to the list component, list employee component, and here we need to call this method employee service dot delete employee, and then pass ID, and then you can call then method response and arrow syntax. After that, once we delete the employee, what we need to do is we need to remove this particular deleted employee from the employees list. So what I will do, I will just remove or I just filter this deleted employee from the employees array. I don't make a all employees REST API call. I simply filter a deleted employee from the employees array. So this employees array already has all the employees. So let me just write the code over here. I'm just going to filter out this particular employee from the employees array. So we have an employees array already, it has all the employees data, and we are going to filter out the deleted employee from the employees array. We are not going to make a REST API call. We are going to reduce a REST API call, that is a remote call from the client application, so that we can make some kind of performance improvement. Now let's save the file and let's go back to the browser and let's see how it works. Let's refresh the URL and let's hit delete button. Yeah, so look at here, the user is successfully deleted, the employee is successfully deleted, and I'm going to delete one more employee, that is Amir. Yeah, the Amir employee is deleted. Again, let me delete one more employee, that is Demo. Here we go. So Demo employee is also deleted. Let me delete one more employee, that is Tom123. Yeah, the employee got successfully deleted. Alright guys, we have successfully implemented delete employee functionality in our employee management application. Alright guys, so far we have implemented CRUD functionality in our employee management application, that is employees list functionality, add employee functionality, update employee functionality, and delete employee functionality. Now I would like to add one more functionality to our employee management application, that is view employee details functionality. So basically in real-time projects we have a employee object with lots of data, right? So in our project, to keep it simple, I have just added first name, last name, and email ID. But in real-time project, we might have a more number of fields in an employee object. And if you look at the table here, we are just showing first name, last name, and email ID. Okay, and sometime we want to see all the details of this particular employee. Okay, and it is not possible to show all the details of this particular employee in a table. Okay, and if user want to see all the details of particular employee, then typically we provide a button over here, that is view button, and once user click on view button, then user will able to see all the details of that particular employee. All right, so this is the feature that we are going to develop. Okay, let's go ahead and let's create a React component to add this functionality. Let's implement this functionality step by step. You can just follow the steps that I am going to implement here right now. Go to the Visual Studio Code IDE, and the first step is we are going to create a new component called view employee component. Okay, go to the components folder. Within the components folder, we are going to create a file called view employee component. Click on new file and just give a name to the file as view employee component and provide .jsx extension. Now we have created a file. Within a file, we are going to create a React class component, and we are going to use a React snippet to quickly create a React class component. Just type the command rcc So in order to create a React class component using React Snippets plugin, you have to first install React Snippet plugin in your VS Code IDE. I already shown you how to install React Snippets plugin in your VS Code IDE in one of the previous video. Please go through the previous videos. Alright guys, once you type RCC then hit enter, this will create a skeleton or a snippet for React class component. Alright, so this is the step 1, and in step 2 we are going to provide a routing for this component. Let's go ahead and let's configure a route for this component. Go to the app.js file, and here let's configure a route for our newly created React component. So I am going to just copy the existing route and paste here, and just give a path to the route. Let's say view-employee/:id. So this is going to be our URL for a view employee page, and let's provide a component for this path, that is view employee component. So make sure that view employee component is imported at the top. Okay, great. Save the file. So this is the step 2. Okay, I hope you guys are following the steps. Now the third step is we are going to add a new button. Okay, so basically we are going to add a button over here, that is a view button. Once we click on a view button, we should able to navigate to the view employee page. Alright, and this is the list employee component, right? So let's head over to the list employee component and let's add a new button over here called view button. Go to the list employee component and go to the table inside a list employee component. So this is the table. Inside table we have actions column. Within actions column we have 2 buttons over here, update and delete. Now let's go ahead and let's add one more button. Let me simply copy the existing button. Let's copy this delete button and paste here, and look at here, this is the on click property of button element, and this is the arrow function. And let's change our event handler method name, that is from delete employee to view employee, and let's change the Bootstrap CSS class, let's say info, and also change the button label, let's give a view. Alright, so this is the important part. So here just we are providing arrow function, and we are just passing ID here to the view employee event handler. Alright guys, and here we are just providing inline style, that is margin left 10 pixel, and let's go ahead and let's define this view employee for event handler. Copy the method name, and here I am gonna define the view handler, that is view employee, and just pass the ID. Okay, so once we click on view button, then view employee event handler will get fired. Within a view employee event handler, we're going to configure a route so it will navigate to the view employee page. Let's go ahead and let's write the code here. This dot props dot history. So I have already explained in one of the previous video how the history object is associated with the route. So you can just watch the previous videos in order to understand how the history object is associated with the route and how it maintains the history of the browser. And then type push method and then brushes, and here this is important. So here you have to use backstick. So sometime you might use a single quote, right? So don't use single quote, you should use backstick symbol, and within a backstick just provide a path over here, that is view employee slash and then dollar, and within a curly braces type ID. So this is the syntax to pass ID to the route. This is the third step. Alright, so let me recap the steps. In first step, we have created view employee component and we have configured a route for view employee component in app.js file. This is the second step. In third step, we have added a view button in list employee component here, and once we click on view employee button, then view employee event handler will get fired and we will successfully able to navigate to the view employee page. So this is the third step. In a fourth step, we are going to design our view employee page and we'll populate employee data on view employee page. Okay, go to the render method. Inside render method we have a return statement, and here are the braces. Within braces we have a div, and within a div we just gonna type some heading over here, like let's say s2 tag, and then I'm just going to write some text here. Let's say view employee page. So just we are going to make sure that we are successfully able to navigate to the view employee page or not. For that I'm just going to give the header like this. Alright guys, let's save all the files and let's go back to the browser and let's see how it works. So here we have got a view button. So once I click on view button, yeah, I can able to navigate to the view employee page. Alright guys, we have successfully created a view employee component, and we have configured route for the view employee component, and we have provided a button for the view employee component, and once I click on view button, I can able to successfully navigate to the view employee page. Now in the next video I am going to design a view employee page and I will populate employee data on a view employee page. In previous video we have created view employee component and we have configured a route for view employee component, and we have added view button to the employees list page. Once we click on view button, we are able to navigate to the view employee page. Alright, now what we'll do, we'll retrieve a employee by this ID and we'll populate that employee on a view employee page. Alright, let's head over to the VS Code ID and let's write the code to populate employee data on the view employee page. Go to the view employee component, and within a view employee component we have a constructor. Within a constructor we have a state object. So inside state object, just create the property called ID. Okay, and we want to retrieve this ID from the URL, right? Okay, so let me show you how to get this ID from the URL. We can get the ID from the route. So we have props has a match and then params. So from the params we can get the ID. Okay, so this is the syntax to get ID from the route, and again we add a employee object to the state of the component. Okay, and then call component did mount method here. So we are going to use component did mount method in order to make a REST API call. So component did mount method is the best place to make a REST API call or make AJAX calls, because this method is called immediately after a component is mounted. Alright, and if you look at the employee service.js file, within this JS file we have already have a method called get employee by ID. So this method we have implemented in one of the previous video, and we are going to call this method to get a employee object by ID, and this method internally makes a REST API call. So look at it, it's axios.get method. So this makes a synchronous call and it returns promise object. So let's go ahead and let's call this method inside our component did mount method. I'll just type employee service and let call get employee by ID method and just pass the ID to this method, state.id, and then this method returns promise object so that we can call then method to handle the response. And this will get a response and then arrow syntax. And then just extract the employee data from the response, and we're going to call this dot set state method in order to set a response data to the employee object, response, and then data. So this should be in a curly braces. Alright guys, so state object has employee property, right? So we are going to just assign the response data to the employee property using set state method. Pretty simple. So once we got a employee data, and we need to show this employee data on a web page, right? So for that we are going to write a JSX code here. Let's go ahead and let's design the web page. Go to the div, within a div create a one more div and give some Bootstrap CSS classes like CRUD body. So we are going to provide a border to the page. So let's go ahead and let's use CRUD Bootstrap CSS class, and then some grid CSS classes, let's say 6 column, and then we're going to display our web page at the center. Let's go ahead and let's use offset. Okay, and then we are going to display a page title, so let's use S3 element for that. The page title can be a view employee details, something like this, and we are going to display this page title at the center. For that, let's use Bootstrap CSS class text center. Okay, and after that let's create a div and let's provide a CSS Bootstrap CSS classes like CRUD body, and within a div let's create a one more div. Okay, and give again a Bootstrap CSS class like row. So we are going to show each employee a field in each row. For that we are going to create a div with Bootstrap CSS class row here, and within this row we are going to just display a employee first name. For that let's use a label here, label, and this should be employee first name, and then create one more div and use curly braces to access the employee object fields. And let's say employee dot first name, and save the file. Let's first see how the employee first name looks on a web page, and then accordingly we'll display other fields. Let's save the file and let's go back to the browser. So we'll get the employee object from the state. So here we need to give this dot state dot employee dot first name. So we need to access the employee object by using this dot state, right? Alright, so let's save the file and let's go back to the browser, and we will be able to see the RAM here. So once I click on view, I can able to see employee first name, that is RAM. Okay, let's display other fields. So let me simply copy this row and paste here, and let's change it accordingly. This is employee last name. this is employee last name, and this is email ID, and here we provide some break tag here. Alright, let's save the file and let's go back to the browser and let's see how it looks. Yeah, here we go. It looks pretty, right? So here we are just populated first name, last name and email ID. So once we click on view button, we can able to see employee first name, last name, email ID. Okay, and you can show all the employee details on this view employee details page. So in our project we have only these three fields, but in real-time project we might have a few more fields, and that you can show on this web page. Alright guys, we have successfully implemented view employee functionality. Alright, great. And in next video we will have an end-to-end demo of this employee management application that we have created so far. We have completed our full stack application using React.js and Spring Boot. Now let's quickly have a end-to-end demo of our full stack application, that is employee management application, and finally we'll see the source code of this project on my GitHub profile. Alright, so let's begin by adding a new employee to the employee list. Let's go ahead and let's click on add employee button, and let's go ahead and let's add a new employee. First name Ramesh, last name Fadtare, and email ID as ramesh@gmail.com, and hit save button. So we have added a single employee to the employees list. Let's go ahead and let's add few more employees. Let's say John Sina, and email ID as john@gmail.com. Yeah, here we go. So let's go ahead and let's add one more employee, that is Tom Cruz, and email ID as tom@gmail.com. and let's go ahead and let's add one more employee called admin, last name as admin, and email ID as ram@gmail.com. Alright guys, so we have added 4 employees to the employees list. Now let's go ahead and let's see the update functionality. So I'm going to update one of the employee. So I'm going to update Ramesh employee. Click on update button, and I'm going to update the first name from Ramesh to Prabhas, and I'm going to update email ID, that is prabhas@gmail.com, and hit save button. Yeah, here we go. The update functionality is working as expected. Now we're gonna delete few employees. So I'm going to delete Tom employee. So let's go ahead and let's click on add delete button correspond to this employee. Yeah, here we go. So let's go ahead and let's delete one more employee. I'm going to delete John Cena employee. Yeah, so delete functionality is also working as expected. Now let's view the employee details. So I'm gonna view the admin employee details. So just click on view button. Yeah, here we go. Okay, great. So these are the 5 functionalities that we have implemented in our full stack application, that is employee management application. So let me recap the functionalities. We have implemented employees list functionality, add employee functionality, update employee functionality, delete employee functionality, and finally we have implemented view employee details functionality. Alright guys, so if you have any queries about the implementation of this project, let me know in the comment section so that I will try to answer your queries or questions. Alright, I have already hosted source code of this project on my GitHub repository. So you can see here I have created a repository called React.js Spring Boot CRUD full stack app. So this is the GitHub repository on my GitHub profile. So I have hosted source code of this project under this repository, and I will provide a GitHub repository link in each video description of this tutorial series, so that whenever you stuck anywhere, then you can just refer this source code on this GitHub repository. Alright, and You can also follow me on GitHub, so that whenever I will publish such full stack projects, you will get notified. I hope you found this tutorial series useful, and yeah, so subscribe to my YouTube channel. Whenever I will publish such full stack project development video tutorial series, then you will get notified. And also share this tutorial series with your colleagues and friends. Yeah, alright guys, thanks for watching this tutorial series. I will see you in the next tutorial series.